In today's video, we're returning to the GE dryer problem, namely when it does not heat. I did a video a few months ago and found out that the major, most frequent problem with this is that the purple heater wire that burns up, gets damaged, and prevents the unit from operating properly. And the best way to solve this is to replace the entire wire assembly, which GE knows is a problem and sells a replacement part for it. So let's get into the unit and replace that purple heating wire together. Full disclosure, we do sell the purple heater wire in links below in the description and comments. It does support the channel if you decide to purchase it through us, even though it's generally expensive. Let's go ahead and get this unit tore down. First, move the dryer in such a way that you can access the rear of the unit. Next, there are two screws at the very bottom of the dryer that require a 1/4 inch hex head screwdriver to remove. One screw is on each side. Next, you need to push the console top rearward, and this does take some force. So I just tap on it with my fist on each side. Once you have both corner edges popped back, you can rock the console up to the top of the dryer. Next, there are two Phillips head screws, one on each side of the rear of the housing like you see here. Use your screwdriver and remove them from the top of the unit. Once the screws are removed, reattach the console top to the dryer lid. You do this by slotting the tabs that are on the front of the console into the lid, then roll the lid down, then tap it back on with your hands into place and lock it back into the lid. This will allow you to lift the lid later without having to remove a ton of items from the top like the metal guard. Next, open up the door of the unit. On the top side, there are two Phillips head screws hiding in the underside of the housing. Use the screwdriver to remove these screws. When you have the screws out and removed, roll the lid gently towards the wall. Be very careful and use the console top to rest the lid of the unit against a nearby wall. This will allow you to bypass a lot of the other teardown steps that the video may show, and we'll have another way on how to rest this lid if you do not have a wall nearby. Now at this step, I would highly suggest wearing gloves and a long sleeve t-shirt or hoodie due to the number of dangerous metal edges that I'm going to show you in just a moment. Now there are two hex head screws, one on each side of the dryer that need taken out. Once you have both of these removed, you can then pull on the door to get ready to remove it. On some models of GE dryers, there's going to be a light switch harness on the left side at the top as you see here, but not all do. You'll need to press into the harness and then remove it. But this is the most difficult part, I think, of dealing with a GE dryer. To remove the door, you need to simply pull up on it to get it off the 3 fingers at the bottom of the dryer. However, the wire harness for the door lock will prevent you from moving this door very far away from the unit. The wire harness to the door lock is very short. You can carefully move the door to the left side and then remove the harness, but the one way that may be a little bit easier is to angle the door forward and rest it on a heavy box, or use a chain to hold the door at an angle so it doesn't fall too far forward off of those hinges at the bottom. This will give you access to the wire harness from the rear. Either way, you have to move the horribly designed plastic cover to the side, then press into the harness and remove the wire harness from the door switch housing. If you split the door to the side, it uninstalls the same way, and it's your choice on how to handle it though. But at either rate, once the harness is removed, you can remove the door and move it aside away from the unit. Note that some models of GE dryers have the door light switch down where the door harness is, and some of them don't. Now let's go ahead and take the drum to the dryer out. We have to remove the idler pulley first, which is directly behind the blower motor housing. This dryer does not have a ton of room for your left hand, but quite a bit for your right, and that's the one you want to focus on. From the camera view on the inside to the right, this is what you're going to see. You can use your right hand to pull the pulley to the right, and the secret is if you pull far enough, there's a little tab on the motor mount of the unit that you can hold the idler pulley in place to remove the belt. The metal of the pulley can rest here, allowing you to have an easier time to release the belt from the idler. Here's another angle of that same action, but I didn't actually realize that this unit had that little mounting part. You want to make sure that the belt is removed from where the motor mount is, so even though it's loose, you need to move it away from that metal pulley that is on the motor. Otherwise, when you try to pull the drum out, it could snag on the belt mount like you see here. I was so focused on getting the right camera shots, I didn't realize that the belt was going to snag. Whoops. Again, note all the metal edges on this dryer. GEs are particularly bad among most brands, so I can't stress this enough. Gloves and long sleeves if possible. The sides, blower housing, and heating pan are all dangerous, and you just never know where you're going to find all kinds of great metal in this machine. At any rate, inspect and remove the purple wire from the heating pan. If you're replacing this, the wire could be burnt or separated from the heater pan terminal connector that may make this easy or difficult to do. Next, use a pair of side snips and remove the plastic cable tie from the chassis. You may be able to just use needle nose pliers and pop the wire tie off from the rear of the unit and not need to cut it. On the left side, there's an additional cable tie that you may need to cut. Be careful here as this trunk has multiple wires and you need to be accurate with your pair of wire cutters. Next, there are 2 or 3 runs of electrical tape that need to be removed to liberate the purple wire from the trunk that you see here. Finally, press in on the motor harness connector and remove it from the motor itself. Although I only show the top side of the connector, the clip that holds this in place has tabs that need pressed on the underside as well. From here you can see the harness assembly. Now we need to remove the purple wire from the housing, and this is a part that most videos and viewers want me to explain. Any other video is probably going to gloss over this step, and it's really not as easy as it seems. Note the orientation of the harness wire and the harness tab, as the new one will need reinserted the same way. To pop the wire out, you need to insert a screwdriver from the wire side of the housing, press down on the retainer tab, and then pull the wire out. This is what the tab looks like, and it was hard to film this on camera. I had a very difficult time with this, and it took multiple takes. You may need a smaller, thinner screwdriver to press on the tab and pull, and I did not have as much luck this way as what I was hoping. Again, GE suggests pressing the tab down with a screwdriver and pulling the wire rearward as per even their online guide, but doing it this way by pressing it down and then pushing metal forward, it resulted in me getting the wire out within 20 seconds, and I tried for about 15 minutes to pull it out the way GE suggested and have on-camera failures that we're just not going through today. From here, we have the wire pressed through the harness housing, and what I'm going to do is take wire cutters and cut the end of the terminal off. This lets me easily pull the wire off from the housing without worrying about the tab and remove it completely. At least for me, this was my solution to removing the difficult wire. But before we install the wire, one key here is what the terminal on the heater pan looks like. If there's any burnt area or degradation, you want to sand it with sandpaper first, and if it is extremely burnt, you may need to replace the entire housing. If you find that the wire ends up getting burnt again after replacing it, or you don't get any heat after the installation is complete, you may need the heater pan too as well. From here, we can go ahead and install the purple wire onto the heater. One side of this connector does not have that locking tab, and it also has the press-in wire harness on it. And you need to insert this terminal into the heating element tab, then press the wire into the hole on the dryer chassis. And as a note, you want to make sure that the terminal is on very snugly. A loose connection is why this wire burnt up in the first place, and you could always use a pair of needle nose pliers to press the connection in to make sure it's super firm. Next, we can reattach the purple wire to the main harness trunk and use a high temperature cable tie to secure it. You could also use electrical tape to bind it together if needed. Next, use some more electrical tape to wrap around the wire trunk in the areas that you removed from earlier, and there will be 2 or 3 strips that you need to add to the unit. Finally, we can reinsert the new purple wire into the motor wire harness. This terminal connection merely snaps in and locks into place. You should only have to orient the wire or be able to in only one direction. You're going to hear a very satisfying click, and the new wire should be locked into the plastic housing, unable to easily remove it from the plastic housing. With this done, reinsert the wire harness into the motor. Note that the harness has a clip on the top and bottom again, and if you had any issues with the wire installation, the wire could potentially pop itself out from the harness, so make sure that it's firmly in place, and you may have to repress it into the harness after it's been connected to the motor, but I had 0 issues with this
but it is something to note if you booger up that harness. The purple wire installation is now complete, and hopefully you didn't cut yourself. If the heater pan was bad, I'm going to have another video on how to replace it because it's very easy to do, and I did it shortly after this part of the video. But make sure during the next reinstallation steps, you only deal with the right kind of metal. So with that done, let's go ahead and put the drum back in for testing. Remember the idler pulley trick earlier? I would go ahead and pull it and have it set on the motor housing before we put the drum in. The drum has 2 grooves in it. Make sure the belt rests on the rear one where the black outline of the belt is. If yours is slightly different, it may be in a different position though. Angle the top of the dryer back against the wall like we did when we took it out. Place something to hold the top up, and then go ahead and take the dryer drum by the belt and slide it into place. The bearing on the rear of the drum should go in straight into the back of the bearing housing. Turn the drum slightly to make sure there aren't any obstructions or any weird noises that would suggest that it didn't get put in right. On the right side of the drum, this is what I see and how I need to put the idler pulley back into place by releasing the tension. But before you do that, make sure the belt is wrapped around the motor pulley properly so that when you release that tension, it goes on perfectly. This process could take a time or two to get right, but hopefully the camera kind of explains the mystery of the process. With the drum in place, you should be able to gently turn it and see the blower housing move along with the belt so everything here is engaged properly. You can also listen to any obstructions that could cause or suggest something didn't get installed right. Now go ahead and put the door back on. The bottom of the door is going to rest on these 3 metal fingers on the dryer chassis. Set the door onto the fingers and then pivot the door forward to the bulkhead. I would go ahead and rest something on the door front so you can reinstall the door lock at this point. Move the stupid plastic cover out of the way. Reinstall the door switch harness into the door like you see here. Hopefully the plastic cover doesn't snap and slash you in the fingers like they like to do on GEs. When you pivot the door into place, you're going to have to get the bearing of the drum to rest on the door frame. This can be a little bit difficult, so you may have to open the dryer door and wedge it into place by moving the drum against the bearing, but it will seat into place. When you put the front of the door on, also make sure to notice that there are metal tabs on the inside of the door and on the sides of the chassis of the machine. These little fingers need to line up to make sure the chassis gets aligned properly. If you did anything to bend or warp the door slightly when working on the machine, it may not fit into place, which could make it look like the door just won't go back on. But once you have the front on, go ahead and insert the 2 short screws back into the top left and top right sides of the dryer. Both of these are 1/4-inch hex screws. If your door light harness was on top like mine, you'll need to go ahead and insert it back into place. Next, you'll want to secure the top of the dryer to the chassis. It needs brought forward and snapped into place. The rear is off a little bit, but we can get that adjusted easily off camera. With the top kind of secure, you can actually just go ahead and test the dryer to see if what you did worked. Plug the dryer in and see what happens. In the case of this dryer, we actually fixed the unit perfectly. It's running great. There's no noise from it at all. It's operating fine, and we haven't even actually put it all back together. It's also heating, and the temperatures look good. The sensor shows that the temperature keeps going up and up, and if you didn't do the installation processes to this point right properly, then you may have overlooked a wire harness and need to go back and check, or there's another difficult problem that this video sadly does not cover. Let's go ahead and finish putting the dryer back together though. Take the 2 long Phillips head screws and reinsert them to the top part of the dryer door. This will secure the top part of the dryer to the front of the cabinet. Now go ahead and insert 2 identical screws at the rear of the unit, one on left, one on right side. If you had unplugged any wires, go ahead and reinstall them at this point, but we did not. To get the console snapped back into place, the 6 fingers need slotted into these holes properly. You'll then pivot the console back into place and then tap on the rear of the console to push it forward to lock it into place. The last step now is to just install the 2 top hex head screws that go down in from the console into the metal top of the dryer. One on the right, one on the left. All the major parts that we looked at for this dryer are going to be in the description of the video. Now, if you click on the links and purchase the parts through those links, it does help me buy more appliances to test, review, and fix. I also have 2 or 3 other videos on this exact GE dryer that we shot all at the same time. Those videos should now be displaying on the screen, so if you have any more questions, they may be able to help you. Have a great day.